We're going to be joined shortly by Kevin Staton. This is Tom Ficklin, and Kevin's here now. Reggie, how you doing?
Hello.
How you doing, man? We're just waiting for Kevin to join us, and we're going to get started. And I think I see the young man ready to join us right now.
Good to see you, brother. We'll be in touch with you soon on the radio.
Excellent. Kevin, is that Mr. Staton? Is Mr. Staton in the house?
Hey.
How you doing?
Hey, brother.
Good.
How you doing?
Reggie, we brought in Reggie to give us some backup. You know, in these days, you need backup. You know, before there was Antifa, there was Reggie. So we gotta be sure that happens.
There was Tom too.
Well, my FBI file is kind of large. I'll be the first to admit that. So we're recording.
It's 6 o'clock.
We're recording, gentlemen. And Kevin, I was just reading. You're in your second year at Chicago Theological Seminary.
I'm still a first year.
Still first year.
I'm a second semester first year.
All right. Here's a quiz for you, man. You're affiliated with Chicago Theological Seminary. When did it start?
Oh, no idea.
Okay.
I could tell you some alumni, but.
Indeed. Well, Jesse Jackson Sr. I think.
Yep. Otis Moss III.
Would be fascinated by that. Founded in 1855, the Chicago Theological Seminary is the oldest higher education institution in the city of Chicago. That's noteworthy. I mean, people think of the University of Chicago,
right,
Northwestern, et cetera. But here's the thing. It was founded with two principles in mind. First, to advance the educate pastors who would minister to people living in the new Western frontier of the United States. But second, to train ministers who would advance the movement to abolish slavery. To train ministers to advance the movement to abolish slavery. So originally established in 1855 under the direction of the abolitionist Stephen Peet. So I mean, I just came across that a few minutes ago.
No, it's very progressive.
And I mentioned that because we're going to go for a strict 27 minutes on Black liberation theology. That even if you weren't attending Chicago Theological Seminary, us discussing James Cone and his legacy of his work, in my mind, how do we abolish racism? How do we abolish Christian hatred, et cetera? So it seems to be that it's not preordained, but I'm really pleased with the synchronicity of your leading us off with the second episode during the first episode, and you're having those deep roots with the Chicago Theological Seminary, not to mention your 20 years plus of teaching and a librarian and your commitment to really social uplift. Let's jump right in. What chapter do you have for us that we're going to kind of talk about?
I specifically wanted to focus on his chapter on the Black church. It's the fourth chapter.
In which book? This
is Black Power, Black Theology.
Okay, that was his.
Black Theology, Black Power.
And that was his first.
This is the first book.
All right.
And we're reading right now. We have an assignment due on. It's a set of essays called. Dwight Hopkins edited this book. This is from '99. Black Faith and Public Talk. It has people like Cornel West, Jeremiah Wright, some womanist theologians, Jacqueline Grant, Emil Towns. So this one is really interesting because they're doing what we're doing now. They're talking about Black theology and Black power, and in relation to their time back in '99. So I think I'm focusing my paper is going to be around Jeremiah Wright's essay.
And just before you continue, just in terms of the pause button, Kevin, tell us what the constant question that I'm going to continue to pose to you, and a good friend Byron Haskins is going to kind of lead us off with the discussion next week, is why was I able to twist Reggie Beeman's to spend some time this afternoon? Why you're willing to invest some of your time? Why is this important for you personally for us to discuss this Black liberation theology at this point in time.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, I was just going to say with you have to give folks a context, and a lot of people don't understand what they're up against. So, you know, Black Lives Matter is basically, we're saying that it's almost like we're asserting our view as humanity. We're asserting our humanity, and Black Power was basically, we're going to take our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was like, all right, we're not asking anymore. And when he writes this book, you know, they're out of options. As you all know, King has been assassinated. You know, my grandma, God rest her soul, used to say, you know, that man never did anything to nobody. And, you know, I was fortunate enough few years ago, we had a workshop in Memphis, and the garbage workers, the men who were striking, came and spoke. And I asked them how they felt when Dr. King was assassinated in their city. And they said the only way they could describe it was a close member of your family. He said, not somebody you heard about, not a political figure, a close member of somebody like your father.
Mm-hmm.
He said that you raised you, not your father you didn't know. He said, so with that in mind, he writes this book, you know, while cities are on fire. And you're trying to write about Jesus and theology, and think about that rage and how we've had to process that rage. I mean, so many of us are getting gunned down. I got to work from the most recent and go backwards. Like, I got to start at Jacob Blake and then go to Breonna Taylor, you know, and then go to George Floyd. You know, I got to work backwards because so many of us have been murdered, modern day lynching, that I can't start from the other end because I'll forget because it's just too many folks. So
And
that's why it's so important.
Reggie, just kind of elaborate on that again. Kevin gave a good try, but I'm still not hearing why we should invest the time. Sometimes morning time should be over. Celebration time, victory time should be on our way. So are you saying that we still are kind of trying to get over our trauma? Reggie, I guess it's directed to you as well. Or is there still hope for us to kind of stay strong and hopeful?
I think we must stay hopeful. One reason why I'm drawn to this conversation is a few years back, I had the opportunity to be at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget that Sunday when my mom, God rest her soul, she was ironing shirts, and it came across the television that 4 girls were bombed in a Birmingham church.
Right.
And it made me really, and she just exclaimed, what have we done to make them hate us so much? Right. They're killing our children. And, you know, years later, it stuck with me when I got into that basement of the 16th Street Baptist Church.
Right.
Then on top of that, very quickly, on the march from Selma to Montgomery, I went down many years for the crossing of the bridge. And I really, really wanted to get into the heads of those theologians who happen to look like us, who put everything on the line because they had faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what has stimulated me to think about Black liberation and Black theology.
Excellent.
And it stays on my brain because, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Reggie, continue.
No, I just want to say that, yeah, without their courage and without their beliefs, when I think about Reverend Vivian and Brother Shuttlesworth,
mm-hmm.
and I had a chance, I was blessed to have a chance to sit down and have lunch with them. And I just thanked them. And it really, because we're of that age, it really, really set me off in a way to try to seek more as to what really moved them in order to push to liberate all of us in some
mm-hmm.
ways.
Kevin, I want you to let's dig into the chapter, and I just wanted to mention, Reggie, that I'm not going to put you on blast in terms of how old you are, but 2 of the girls were born right around our time. They were born in 1949. So I mean, and
Uh-huh.
I'm assuming you went to Sunday school, and I certainly went to Sunday school. So I didn't find this out until like maybe 2 months ago when I was reading up on it. That I was born in the same year, and I was in a church around the same age as when they were. So you're right. The identification is really really profound. Kevin, let's jump right in terms of the chapter that's kind of resonating with you and why it pertains to even today in 2020, and what kind of lessons we can learn as we want to move forward.
Well, it actually touches on something that Brother Beeman just said, with that whole concept of faith. And I've always said to people that there's a big difference between being religious and being a person of faith. Anybody can be religious. Anybody can go to church. Anybody can participate in a ceremony. But faith is something different. And
Amen.
this chapter stands out because, as Brother Beeman knows, our pastor, Larry C. Green Sr., after 2015, when Dylan Roof goes into Mother Emanuel and murders them at Bible study, I called Pastor Green and to say, this is something totally different than from the civil rights movement. And black theology, black power is a great benchmark to understand what you're dealing with. Because this isn't left a bag full of dynamite on some steps and let it blow up and at 16th Street. This is someone who sat through a Bible study for an hour, got up, and then started executing the people in the Bible study. And they were praying and crying, asking, why are you doing this? This is up close and personal. This is where we're at a point where, and Cone talks about this, where, especially as the Black church, your refusal to address this and confront the white church on this. The fact that now you don't even see us as human, to the point as fellow Christians. And this is what Dr. King kept pushing them on. His letter from a Birmingham jail is about that contradiction. I mean, it's some next level stuff to sit in a Bible study and get up and kill folks. And so what he talks about in terms of the Black church is, number one, the Black church was Black power. And before we had a name for it. And it was the Black church at the forefront. If you think about it, even in terms of Black Lives Matter, that was us. And in the sixth, that was us out there marching and demanding justice. That was us. It was the central organizing piece. That's why they would blow them up and burn them down. And so he goes on and is so powerful, because the chapter for me shows his growth. Because when I talked to him in 2017, the year before he died, that was my research centers around the Black church after Dr. King. What happens and what's the paradigm shift? And he told me, he said, Kevin, you got to study the evangelicals. And I said, why? He said, because what they did was they indoctrinated Black ministers. They taught them, brought them into their schools, and sent them back out, and they took over Black churches. So now you have churches, and I know it's not all, but the ones that are holding on, churches don't even touch Black power. They don't touch it. They don't deal with it. They just follow along, and it's a travesty, because there used to be a time where the Black church was the one place where we would confront these issues around race, issues around voting. We all remember this. Everybody remember this. I'm a 70s baby, so I came in on the tail end of this, and I'm probably close to the last generation that grew up, I think, in the church. So think about what your church announcements were like, Tom. The infamous church announcements. The church announcements used to be, they would include things like the NAACP's having a meeting. The church announcements would tell you about Black businesses. The church announcements would tell you who your Black representatives. The church announcements involved, when I was at Grace Baptist, there was a direct connection. We had a scholarship committee and we had a parent-teacher association where the Black church is directly involved in the school system and the educational development of the children in its community. Everybody doesn't do that anymore. And you have to ask the question, how have you been indoctrinated? That's what he talks about, the black church, because black power is controlling your community. So how have you been indoctrinated where all of a sudden you don't want to do that anymore?
Let me twist it a little bit, Kevin, for you. And I really, again, this theme continues to come up in terms of the black church's mission and how they may have lost their way. But I'm still also curious in terms of us doing this I'll say communion time on Fridays. What would you say to folks that hate church, that would never want to enter a church? Does black theology and black power have anything of value for them, for the unchurched, for people that will never even step foot in a church? My belief is that it does have a meaning and a message, but I'm curious what you think about that.
You have to have a blueprint. I think that one of the biggest mistakes we're making is we're not honest about what we're dealing with. I'll give you a prime example. Right now, the Proud Boys, right, that are in the news, and the other 155 white supremacist organizations. What black folks need to understand, this is where the black church comes in, and the responsibility of black ministers to explain this. There's a conservative, I know Brother Beeman knows this because all his years in politics. There's somebody that they're just conservative. I'm conservative. I could be considered conservative on certain things.
That's right.
So there's conservatives, there's racists, there's Confederates, and there's Nazis. When you get to Confederates and Nazis, you're dealing with a whole different type of person than you are with somebody that's just conservative and racist. Somebody that's racist might not want to kill you. A conservative or a Nazi, guess what? It's pretty methodical. So when you have people that are going out packing AR-15s and assault rifles and walking up to protests where you know people at that protest are probably carrying around signs. What is it, Kenosha, Washington? The dude tried to fight him with a skateboard and got killed. That's all he had. This is black theology for somebody who is an agnostic or atheist. There's an activist component that you need to understand about activism, especially if you're a person of African descent, about the activism and your legacy of activism. And you can't talk about social activism in the United States of America for black folks and not talk about the black church. You can't.
So why do we need the word? And I want to give tremendous and full respect to your studies at Chicago Theological Seminary and your involvement with churches in New Haven as well as in Waterbury. Why do we need the theological component? How does the theological component drive that passion and that strategic tactical action?
It goes back to what Brother Beeman said. Is faith, and it is transcendent. It goes beyond. You have to have, for them to do what they did, there was a level of faith. Just like you, Brother Beeman, when I was down in Alabama and we walked across the bridge, I tell people all the time, I've never been to Israel. I've never done one of those trips where you get baptized in the Jordan and you walk the places that Jesus walked. But I crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and that was a pilgrimage for me because it was an act of faith. I mean, to walk across a bridge and know that waiting for you at the bottom is not the Proud Boys or some random, it's the police. And the police are there to bust your head open and kill you. And so there's a theological aspect in terms of people of faith. There's a depth that goes into faith, because what happens is when I stopped being religious and became a person of faith, it made me respectful of other people's faith. And it made me understand the resolve and the convictions of somebody who's a practicing Muslim or a practicing Buddhist or a practicing Hindu, because now you understand faith and you understand how much that's the centerpiece, how much that means to people. So that theological aspect, James, that's what he's grappling with. He's grappling with Jesus and what he's learned all his life growing up in church, but also with black power. And he comes to this, this catharsis where he's like, Jesus, the message of Jesus is Black power. He says that.
Yes.
He's like, Jesus is Black power. And I was just, when I read that, I was like, whoa. Like, because he connects it to oppression. And he's like, look how they treated Christ. And that's why he has a book later on that he writes called The Cross and the Lynching Tree.
Kevin, reference some of the
about how they crucify us all the time.
Reference, just take a little pause and just play the books again. I know you have them nearby, just so people can be reminded.
Oh, okay.
And then Reggie, I know you have something to say. And Byron, if you want to make a comment, please just raise your hand, and I think that's your picture. But what books do you have there?
I have some, not all, but I have a good amount.
Right.
I don't think I brought Jesus and the Disinherited behind me. But just Cone's books.
Indeed.
So this is what we read. This is the first book we had to read for class, God of the Oppressed. This is much more theological. Like, this is what you just talked about, Tom. Like, you have to have an understanding of people like Barth, Bonhoeffer. You have to understand something about Karl Marx. And what I always tell people is, don't get intimidated. Most of this stuff, you can watch a YouTube video for 5 minutes and have some foundational understanding of the Communist Manifesto and Karl Marx, so you know what he's talking about. This is a book I just mentioned. He wrote this a lot later. The Cross and the Lynching Tree. Just trying to see when this is. This was it's 2011. And
there are various YouTube videos up of his giving lectures on it.
Yeah. You sent a great lecture on it. This is him. Signed it to me. 17.
Show off.
Yeah. It was so powerful. You know, it was like, you all know that I'm from the South. It was like sitting with your like great uncle or your uncle, and he's just talking to you about life. Like that was it. When I met the garbage workers from the 68 in Memphis, these men I was in my mid 40s. These men were twice my age. They were in their mid 80s. And we were in the bathroom. I was the only Black teacher there. And they talked to me about being a Black father, raising children, and being a Black Christian. I cried through the whole conversation because it's so powerful. I don't need somebody with 15 PhDs to talk to me about life. You know, Brother Beeman knows I got more from the men at Grace, you know. Deacon Hunter.
Few more books, Reverend, before we go. Yeah.
My Soul Looks Back.
All right.
Talking about his life. This one came not too long after Black Theology, Black Power, the Spiritual and the Blues. And he talks about that in the lecture that you sent, because he talks about it's like the blues are secular gospels. Like secular gospel music. So it's like they were taking our pain.
And I think, just as an aside, Brother Haskins is going to kind of expound upon that next Friday for us as well. But Reggie, share a little bit. I see you're saying, I saw you giving some amens to.
Oh yeah, I think Brother Staton is very powerful. He's dedicated in his passion and his studies. But I did mention faith. But the question that you advanced, Tom, was, why should we take? How can we basically hit those who are not in church and bring them to church in terms of the value of that experience? And Brother Staton basically said you need like a map or and I believe that we need an anchor. And in some ways, the church, even in Cone's writing, that was the anchor for our community. I'm a follower of Leon Howard Sullivan, the founder of OICs.
Yeah.
And believe me, you talk about economic power, empowering people to get jobs and taking care of themselves. If you read Brother Bill, you have the blueprint for our liberation. And a lot of it is it's so easy to read. I should put it that way, in terms of what we can do in order to effectuate change and unify.
And when you mentioned OIC, the Opportunities Industrialization Centers, yes, absolutely.
Yes, and it's faith-based. And it provides an anchor. There wouldn't have been an OIC if there wasn't a Zion Baptist Church in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. And people forget about Dr. Sullivan's the several years that he had the economic development trips to Africa. People forget about
Yes.
South Africa. Yeah.
I went to Ghana with Reverend Sullivan, and we went to the Ghanaian Parliament and announced how we were going to invest in the Ghanaian stock market, which we did. We raised $400,000 to do that. We built schools in Africa, but all this came out of the church. And that's the beauty of it. It came out of the church. Kevin mentioned Grace. Right across the street, we have 2 housing projects that Grace members built. It's a blessing, but it's something that we have to mold and pass along and show the value that we do have an anchor. And that's why I'm interested in this.
Amen.
Kevin, speak a little bit about, just as Reggie mentioned, to cultivate the younger people. And again, you've been involved with really hands-on in touch with younger people for 20 plus years in terms of teaching in New Haven and in Norwalk and in Madison, Connecticut, and et cetera. So I'm just curious about what do you think would be some ways that could not necessarily entice, but encourage and motivate folks, young people, say between 20 and 40, to kind of explore what their belief systems might be in the context of Black liberation theology.
I think for younger folks is, and I deal with this even within my own family, is there's a point where I do this with my daughter. I tell her, you're intelligent, but intelligence doesn't equal wisdom. And wisdom comes from you go through experiences and you actually learn from those experiences. That's how you get wisdom. So you can grow really old and not have any wisdom. Mm-hmm. Because you didn't learn nothing from it. You just do the same thing all the time. So for young people that are entering this, it's this whole thing of understanding your power and your energy. And with Black power and Black theology and it goes into something Brother Beeman and others have taught me, you have to think long-term. You have to look at the long game. As a teacher, I can't tell you, especially from my elementary school years, I've taught baby Mitch McConnells. I've taught baby Trumps.
Indeed.
You know, I've taught kids that you're like, unless I live to be 200 or 150, I'm gonna be dead when they're going full strength and trying to get young people to understand that, look, it's great that you have all this energy right now, but this is where it gets into looking at and understanding past movements, how these movements have been infiltrated, how these movements have been torn down, especially within the church. That's what James Cone was trying to tell me in 2017. Like, Kev, you have to look and study how they've indoctrinated these dudes and send them out. And I know Brother Beeman's seen this all the time in politics. You know, it's like the Matrix. You know, they farm these folks, these dudes. I mean, think about it. If Fox News wants to get a Black person to come up there and denounce anything that is going to help Black people, that's a quick phone call. They got folks that'll run to come in and do it. And to try to get young people between 21 and 40 to understand, what are we doing on our end? You know, to understand that, you know, people like Leon Sullivan, Maynard Jackson, you can go back to Benjamin Mays and how these were cats, they were trying to build institutions because they understood that you got to have something to counter those institutions. This is so powerful because Black theology, Black power deals with something that's very important that we don't talk about. I'm dealing with that in class now, is how we've been taught to stay out of politics. But what's the moral majority with Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson? What are the evangelicals? The evangelicals are a major right-wing voting bloc. And for the Black church to take this attitude of all of a sudden now we're not worried about that. You know, it's a travesty. It's a travesty.
Well,
Byron, Byron, I want to unmute Byron Haskins and see if he wants. We're going to hear from him next Friday. And Byron, you would want to comment a little bit again. You'll have your day in the sun, but we all got our days in the sun every day now that we're together with one another. I just wondered whether you wanted to comment on something that you might have heard.
Well, Tom, I'm so glad. I tuned in. I told you that I have something at 7 o'clock, and that's why I was tuning. At 7 o'clock, I'm going on to the Black Joy Textathon. We're trying to reach, Black folks like to text. And so there's a national organization that's trying to, and I don't know whether it's faith-based and political-based or mixed or anything. I'm just joining in to try to get folks to, Black folks to get engaged and understand the power of their vote. But I've really enjoyed listening in to this conversation because I'm hearing the strong words of a couple of some wonderful men of faith who understand that I grew up, I'll say it this way, I grew up in Detroit in the Black church. And I'll throw a name out there. My mom and some other people were really good friends. And I lived down the street from Aretha Franklin's dad, and we were part of that community. And so I understand as a child, when I grew up in the 1960s, that there is an intersection between faith and politics and power in the community. And in the 1960s, Detroit had a very powerful Black community, and it was destroyed, and it's floundering right now. But my mother belongs to a church that's is led by Bishop Edgar Van, and I don't know if anybody knows about him, but he's built communities, he's built housing, he's put together an organization. He has a political organization. He's well respected. There's still some Black power there.
And Byron, we're just going to go on for a few more minutes, but tease us a little bit about you found among the various options in terms of Dr. Cone. You found a particular chapter in one of his books that kind of resonates with you, and you're going to talk about it next week. Tease us with the title. What chapter? I think it was something on spirituals.
Yeah, well, just the spirituals and the blues are two sides of one story, and that's the story of being Black in this country. And as I wrote to you in a text, I kind of see it as saying the middle passage took us away from the motherland, and the blues and the spirituals are talking about how we get back, given what we know from what we've experienced here. And that's the kind of resonance that's in the blues and spirituals.
Excellent. Don't give us any more. That's just a trailer, folks, to kind of tune in next Friday. That's six. So if you have to run, I certainly appreciate that. Kevin, kind of lead us some more in terms of either that particular chapter or perhaps even another paper that you might be working on.
There's so many. This is one of my favorites. Is he not only talks about the Black church, but he talks about the role the white church plays. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he talks about is he says, love without justice is meaningless.
Say that again.
He says, love without justice is meaningless. And it really gets into this whole thing of, and Brother Beeman mentioned this earlier, if you want us to, form these coalitions and do it, but do it where we don't really have a demand, or that we don't really want effective change. So it's been, and I remember I wrote next to it, love without respect. You can, even in individual relationships, right? You can claim to love somebody, but if you don't respect them, what kind of love is that? But that whole point of love without justice is that you can't come to us and say, oh, we're all Christians, we're going to march together and Black Lives Matter. And when it's over, I'm going to go back to my neighborhood. And then you're going to go back to your neighborhood, which has been redlined and segregated. And then we'll be on our merry way until the next time when we meet up. or I'm going to, yeah, it's so important, social activism, and I'm gentrifying you.
Hmm.
I'm moving you all. I went to school in D.C. The Shaw Howard area in D.C. was maybe 80% Black when I was there, and now it's maybe 25. So that whole component, and he does this whole thing where he talks about the three functions of church: preaching, service, and fellowship. And he talks about how an oppressor thinks that having the power to enslave is freedom. So when you get all these people that connect to these oppressive policies and oppressive political platforms, they think somehow they're free. I mean, look at this whole thing with people going up to the governor's mansion with assault rifles because they felt like their freedom was being infringed on by being told to wear a mask. And now you're saying, now is it a hoax because your president has it?
Maybe.
Yeah. I didn't want to start that. I'm kind of when I started, I was like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right on time, right on time. Everybody's like, approval ratings in the dumpster, and Biden's riding high. You got to do something to stop that momentum. And everybody's, oh, we feel so sorry for you. You got the virus that, you told us didn't exist.
Calm down, gentlemen. Calm down. Let's kind of take another 8 or 9 minutes. But Reggie, I want to, so glad that you're on the call. I want to ask a relatively personal question, and we haven't really talked a lot in person, but we've known each other over the years. Share with us a little bit, if you would, about your faith walk. Do you remember times in your life, maybe when you were in 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, that kind of, from a discernment standpoint, that let you know that you were, are there any incidents or episodes that caused you to kind of reflect on where you were at that point in life and caused you to be clear about where you should go next?
Oh, there were many. There were many things, Brother Tom. I remember walking up from our downtown area to Grace Baptist Church, and I ran into our Reverend Reed, who everyone knew. Reverend Reed got raised with me, and we also, and it was only like a 5-minute talk, but I watched him and I learned a lot from him. I mean, he knew 5 languages. He used to teach at Tuskegee. His dad got ill. He came home. He pastored for 40 years. He was just something different. He was a different type of pastor. And it still tests my faith today because I look at the New Jacks, I'll call it that way. And many, I don't mean that, no disrespect, Kevin, but I look at many of the.
You know I'm not one of them. So
yeah, I know that
way at all.
Yeah, but basically my point is, we don't want to see the hypocrisy anymore. We want it real, and the young people want it real. Yes. And that's one reason why I've had that walk of faith, because I want it real. Am I a theologian? No. But I believe my spirit's in the right place. My faith is in the right place. I do what I feel I should do on this faith walk.
Indeed. Kevin, kind of last words, because again, just so glad it's a Friday night, but glad you guys could spend the time to invest really in the universe and sharing this information. Will be on the platform, etc. Thanks again for joining the Black Theological Group. Kevin, any last words as we kind of conclude, and look forward to kind of chatting with everybody next Friday at 6.
I would say that the last word is, one of the things that really struck me in meeting with Dr. Cone was he went over books that he felt like I should read and authors that I should read. He didn't talk about his book. He talked about James Baldwin. He talked about Toni Morrison. He talked about Maya Angelou. He talked about Richard Wright. He talked about like foundational books that Black folks should have to understand their experience through a better lens, because that helps you with your theology.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, I mean, James Baldwin was Amen Corner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, there's just so many of our authors that have touched on this, and that you have to have a functioning understanding of your own literature to understand. I mean, so he talked about the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, those are things that you should know, and that goes into what you said about people that may not have the faith, but that really gives you like a lens into understanding what because black theology is basically at its very core is saying that, number one, God is on our side
Yes.
as the oppressed, and also that as a people you have to define your faith through our experience in America, and understanding our oppression and what that means, and that our faith compels us to fight against it. Reverend Shuttlesworth said that in 2007. We were on the bus with him, and the people were asking him, why'd you keep doing it? You know, you were getting beaten. They blew your house up. They blew your church up. What? And he said, I have faith.
Amen.
That was his answer. And some people got it, and some people didn't. But he said, my faith wouldn't let me quit.
I think we got to quit on that. That's we want to we want to digest that every day, 24/7, 365. But definitely until next Friday, gentlemen. It's really great. You could join us and say that again, Kevin. Faith will not.
He said his faith would not allow him to quit. He said, if you have faith, you won't quit.
That's right.
And this was a man who, you couldn't be in leadership in the church if you didn't have a voter registration card or you hadn't tried to register to vote. That's some deep stuff.
Yes.
Because you can't, if you're not fighting for it. So why are we gonna let you leave? That's deep.
All right, gentlemen. We'll continue to take the deep dive next week. Stay healthy, stay safe, really, and God bless everybody.
All right, take care. Great to see you,
God
brother.
bless you. Great seeing you too. Thanks for the call.
You.
All right, see you, Mr. Haskins. I'll see you next week.
Next
All
week.
right.
All right.
All right, gentlemen.
Take care. Yeah.
Take care.